You know, it's kind of wild to think that this global powerhouse, the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, it actually kicked off partly because of a Playboy article. Seriously.
Yeah, it's one of those weird origin stories.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, you and I are stepping right into the cage, metaphorically speaking, into the intense world of mixed martial arts.
That's right. And we've got some really rich material here from the best of mixed martial arts. Think of it like well, a compilation instructionals, fighter insights, training tips, all from huge names.
Names like Randy Couture, Royce Gracie, Chuck Liddell,
Yeah.
the list goes on. Legends, really.
Exactly. So you get the perspective from guys who were there, who built the sport.
And for you listening, this isn't about wading through textbooks. Consider this deep dive your shortcut, your inside look at how MMA blew up, the mindset of these athletes, and some really surprising stories behind it all. We're pulling out the key stuff for you.
Yeah, those aha moments. We want to give you a solid understanding, whether you're a hardcore fan or, just curious, without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Our mission today, basically map out the territory. We'll look at the UFC's beginnings, other early players like rings.
Right, rings is fascinating, often overlooked.
Then we'll get inside the heads of some champions, look at their training, their philosophies, and just sort of soak up the culture around MMA.
So let's start at the beginning, right? The UFC.
The genesis. So the source material points to Royce Gracie, Art Davie, and Campbell McLaren. Their idea was, well, pretty radical then. Pit different martial arts styles against each other.
Like a karate guy versus a sumo wrestler or jiu-jitsu versus boxing. See what actually works in a real fight. No points. Just who wins.
And it caught on like wildfire on pay-per-view, didn't it? It was raw, unpredictable.
Totally. But that rawness also brought major heat. Controversy City. You had figures like Senator John McCain famously calling it human cockfighting.
Ooh, yeah. That phrase stuck. Huge political backlash.
It really highlights that tension. Entertainment versus sport versus what the public or politicians are comfortable with. It was a battle from the start.
And that pressure took its toll. After just, what, 5 events? Gracie and Davie sold their shares to SEG. Davie stuck around for a bit.
But then the cable companies pulled out after UFC 12.
Yeah.
That really hurt them, sent them into what fans call the dark ages.
Yeah.
SEG was bleeding money.
Yeah, it shows how tough it is to launch something new, especially something controversial. You're fighting on multiple fronts, public opinion, politics, just staying afloat.
Then comes 2001, the turnaround. SEG is basically bankrupt.
And in step Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta. They buy the UFC, and this is where Dana White enters the picture big time.
Right. The Fertittas create Zuffa, put Dana White in charge as president, and he just transforms it. Getting it sanctioned in Vegas was massive.
Absolutely massive. Legitimacy, finally. What was it about White's approach? How did he pull it off?
Well, the sources point to his knack for media, for promotion. Getting those crucial TV deals, pay-per-view first, then Spike TV, eventually major networks. He essentially rebranded the whole thing, made MMA mainstream, or at least started that push.
Yeah, he really hammered that message home. For a lot of people now, UFC is MMA, but like you said, the history's broader.
Definitely. Which brings us to the Rings Fighting Network, Akira Maeda's promotion.
Ah, yes, rings. Important, but maybe less known in the U.S. compared to UFC or PRIDE back in the day.
For sure. But they had a huge international footprint starting way back in '91. Events in Holland, Russia, Australia, even here. Lots of different fighters got exposure there.
But the weird thing about early rings, a lot of the Japanese shows were, well, worked, right? Like pro wrestling?
Exactly. Predetermined outcomes, mostly.
Cool.
Which is kind of surprising now. It wasn't until 1999, when UFC and PRIDE were really heating up, that rings shifted fully to legitimate MMA rules.
So they adopted the 4-ounce glove, the kind of rules we recognize today, trying to compete, basically.
Yeah, the landscape was competitive. Promotions had to adapt or die. And rings, before it eventually folded, it was a key launching pad for some absolute monsters.
Like who?
Fedor Emelianenko got big there. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, Minotauro too. Huge names who then went on to dominate elsewhere.
Wow. So rings played a bigger part than maybe some fans realize. Okay, speaking of fighters, this source material really dives into some legends. Let's start with Randy Captain America Couture.
Yeah, the book catches him after that win over Gabriel Gonzaga. He's just this methodical machine. The source talks about how he just Ground Gonzaga down, push the pace.
But what always struck me about Couture, and it's highlighted here, is his composure. He ate some big shots in that fight. Remember that crazy high kick from Gonzaga?
Yep, came out of nowhere.
But Couture just absorbed it,
Yeah.
stuck to the plan, and then the craziest part.
The broken arm.
The broken arm, yeah. It
Yeah.
came out like 2 days later. Fractured his ulna, the smaller forearm bone, during the fight. And still got the finish.
Unbelievable. Just sheer toughness and willpower. Apparently he knew something was wrong, but just, fought through it. 6 weeks in a splint, luckily no surgery needed.
And that mentality. He always embraced being the underdog, didn't he? Used it as fuel.
Totally. He talks about thriving on proving people wrong. That's such a powerful mindset for any competitor, really.
And he was already looking ahead. Mentioned wanting fights with Fedor or Nogueira, the top guys, always chasing the biggest challenge.
And beyond himself, he was building his team, Extreme Couture. His focus wasn't just grabbing killers. It was about finding good people, creating a positive environment.
Real leadership. And he was juggling so much. The fighting, the team, his family life, plus acting roles, commentator in Red Belt, villain in the Scorpion King prequel.
Yeah, it shows these guys aren't just fighters. They're entrepreneurs, actors, leaders.
And the business side, too. That Extreme Couture clothing line with Affliction, apparently it just exploded.
Blowing up, I think the source says. Yeah, shows the commercial side of MMA was really taking off that. He even noted the difference, how much bigger the opportunities were in the U.S. versus Europe at the time.
Okay, let's switch gears. Bas Rutten, El Guapo.
A true OG. He makes the point he was fighting in Pankration in Japan before the UFC even existed. Pioneer status.
Definitely. And what a character. He hoped people would remember the good stories about him. And there are tons. Always charismatic.
Yeah, the handbook mentions him wanting to do more commentating, maybe even one last fight. You never know with Bas.
Now, Dan Henderson.
Yeah.
Hendo. Another absolute legend with incredible longevity.
His story really shows those cross-promotional rivalries, like his history with Wanderlei Silva. Lost him in PRIDE.
Then comes back years later in the U.S., gets the win, and holds belts in 2 major organizations at the same time. First guy to do that. PRIDE and UFC.
Incredible feat. Shows his adaptability and resilience. And his path to MMA is interesting, too. Elite wrestler, Olympic alternate.
But switch because...
Money. He's blunt about it. 0 money in wrestling. Winning 1 MMA tournament, King of Kings, got him like $230,000. Big difference.
Can't argue with that logic. Clearly, the economics push athletes in certain directions.
For sure. And he found MMA more exciting anyway. At the time of this source, he was eyeing a fight with Rampage Jackson, who was the UFC champ then.
The source even gives us his favorite things. Steak, country music.
Sci-fi movies, island getaway. Has a human touch,
Speaking of Rampage, Quinton Rampage Jackson, the handbook gives us his background too. Natural athlete, football, wrestling.
Though he jokes his wrestling sucks so bad because he only did it for a short time.
Huh. And wanted to be a pro wrestler or a stuntman as a kid. That entertainer streak was always there.
Yeah, you see it in his personality. Broad music taste too, rap, hip-hop, gospel, reggae. But also valued his privacy, mixed feelings about fame.
Interesting preferences for where to live, Japan or Vancouver. Even talks about dating differences.
Right, gives you a glimpse behind the persona. At the time, training in SoCal, and he felt maybe the UFC was underestimating him heading into that Liddell fight.
Now, Matt Hughes, dominant champ for a long time, incredible wrestling base.
Seriously decorated. 2-time state champ in high school, 2-time All-American in college, D1, just phenomenal wrestling credentials.
And got into MMA almost by accident. Friend told him about a small show in Chicago, a $100 prize.
Yep, won his first fight quick, just using his wrestling. Shows how a strong base in one discipline could translate early on.
And he really believed wrestling was the best base, right?
Yeah.
Because you control where the fight happens.
Absolutely. Dictate standing or ground. He gave huge credit to Pat Miletich and Jeremy Horn, training at Team Miletich, said the gym wars were often tougher than the actual fights.
That's intense. And his strategy breakdown is smart how he approaches strikers versus submission guys.
Yeah, against strikers, careful takedowns, hands high, use the fence. Against grapplers, okay standing or happy to be in their guard and use ground and pound, didn't see the guard as a huge offensive threat to him anymore. Shows that strategic evolution.
Okay, check the Iceman Liddell. We get some personal stuff here.
Yeah, that little anecdote about having breakfast with his daughter before a trip humanizes the Iceman image.
Totally. And him visiting that young boy with leukemia, that shows real character, using his platform for good.
Definitely. Despite the schedule, he made time. And the mohawk.
Ah, yes, the iconic mohawk. Just something he always wanted to do. Did it at 21. Became his signature look.
Funny to think he studied accounting first, got into submission wrestling through a college buddy, then full-time fighting.
Hmm.
Emphasized consistency in his training camps.
Lived by a toad, too, keeping his word, honor, and enjoyed the fruits of his labor, that Ferrari.
Big step up from his first car. A station wagon, apparently. Also did promotion for the movie 300. Believed MMA would overtake boxing. Really hyped about the sport's future.
And importantly, still open to learning new things, even at the top. His advice was simple, right?
Yeah. Just follow your dreams, man. Have fun in life. You only get one of them. Good life advice, really.
Now for a pioneer on the women's side, Gina Carano.
Right. Tomboy growing up, background in dance and gymnastics, then Muay Thai, then MMA. Interesting path.
Had an artistic side too, writing music, played drums, and loved her pit bulls, her babies.
Yeah. Seemed like she had a lot going on beyond fighting. Was 3-0 at the time, already successful, but thinking about relationships, maybe kids down the line. A whole person, not just a fighter.
Liked low-key stuff too, live music, Lake Tahoe, San Diego beaches. Her measure of success was looking back happy, feeling she chased her dreams.
Strong heart, belief in dreams. That comes across.
Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, Minotauro, transitioning from Pride's ring to the UFC's cage.
That was a big deal. He talks about the different atmosphere and the threat of elbows in the cage causing cuts less common in the Pride ring.
But he was positive about adapting.
Yeah, felt the cage led to more action, less stalling.
Yeah.
And he was stoked about American fans understanding the submission game. Appreciated that knowledge.
Seems grounded outside fighting too, training, dogs, surfing, time with his daughter. Hopes she might follow him into martial arts.
DJ Penn, the prodigy, legend. His pre-fight routine is interesting.
Tapering down training intensity the last 10 days, then complete rest for almost a week.
Exactly. Body fully recovered. And his win over Matt Hughes, he saw it as huge personal growth. The previous fight was a draw, so this win for him validated his championship.
Took a year off after that first Hughes fight too, right? Lived a normal life, felt it helped him.
Yeah, reset his perspective and his answer to who he'd most want to fight.
Himself. Classic BJ. Ultimate test of toughness.
Wanted to be remembered as someone who never quits, and as a coach, aimed to teach deep BJJ understanding.
Roger Huerta. Powerful story of overcoming a tough childhood.
Really tough. Abuse, kicked out young, but found positive influences in his coach and adoptive mom, his teacher. Inspiring resilience.
His goals showed that, too, wanted titles in 2 weight classes, but also wanted to open gyms, give back, pay it forward.
Anderson Silva, the Spider. Another icon. Humble beginnings in Brazil, strong family values.
Liked the respect for individuality he found in the U.S.
Yeah.
And could have been a police officer?
Yeah, or working at McDonald's, his first job. Started fighting professionally at 19. His definition of success wasn't just wins.
It was about character, how you treat people.
Exactly. Very grounded. And deeply grateful to the fans for the sport's growth.
Okay, stepping outside the fighters for a sec. Bruce Buffer.
The voice of the octagon. And that catchphrase. Let's get ready to rumbly.
Made how much?
The source says over $400 million in retail sales from licensing. Mind-blowing. Power of branding.
No kidding. And then Jacob Stitch Duran, the cut man.
Absolutely crucial role. Stitch explains how little time they have, like under a minute between rounds to stop bleeding, patch cuts, high pressure.
Needs skills and personality, right? Keep the fighter calm.
Totally. He even breaks down the types of cuts, gushers, slicers, hairy situations, vivid stuff. Shows the gritty reality behind the scenes.
Back to the fighters. Georges St-Pierre, GSP, reflecting after a loss.
Yeah, mentioned a knee injury affecting him in a fight he felt obligated to take. Personal changes too, moving out on his own.
Touching story about his parents, worried at first, then super supportive. Giving his mom the UFC belt.
Wow. Great gesture of gratitude. And his approach to bullies or negativity. Focus on positivity, not hate.
Smart. Emphasized training the brain just as much as the body. Credited his parents for encouraging him to follow his passion. Balance is key.
And finally, a somber note, the passing of Grandmaster Carlson Gracie Sr.
A true BJJ legend. Huge impact as a fighter and coach. Trained so many top guys. His legacy is immense.
Absolutely. A massive loss for the entire martial arts world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on the people. Let's shift to some pivotal moments, those turning points in MMA history. We mentioned the UFC's start.
But the source points even further back to that weird 1976 fight, Muhammad Ali versus Antonio Inoki.
Ugh, the first big mixed martial arts fight. Except it wasn't great, was it?
Not really. Weird rules. Inoki mostly kicked Ali's legs while on his back. Ali barely threw punches, ended up hospitalized with blood clots. More bizarre than brilliant.
Yeah, it didn't exactly showcase either boxing or wrestling well, but an early attempt, I guess.
Then, jump to 1989, that Playboy article, Bad.
Which inadvertently led to the UFC.
Right. It spotlighted Roy and Gracie's school. Our Davey read it. They connected. They actually used that article later to pitch the UFC concept to production companies, Kemmel and Clarence at CAG Bit. So yeah, Playboy played a strange key role.
Fast forward to 97, the political heat forces UFC underground, basically. Cable companies drop them.
Major crisis. But ironically, it forced changes. New rules, mandatory 4-ounce gloves.
Which some say made strikes more dangerous, but it also professionalized the sport, gave it structure.
Definitely a double-edged sword, but necessary for survival and eventual acceptance.
Then the 2001 Zuffa acquisition. The Fertittas buying the UFC from SEG.
That was the lifeline. Huge investment, smart business, Dana White's leadership. Getting licensed in Nevada was the crucial first step. They lost a lot of money initially, but had that long-term vision.
Their commitment saved it, no doubt. And then 2005.
The Ultimate Fighter. TUF. On Spike TV.
Absolute game changer.
Totally. It brought MMA into living rooms, created stars like Forrest Griffin, Chuck Liddell, people connected with the fighters' stories. UFC's popularity, PPV buys, they just exploded after TUF won. Probably the single most important event for UFC's growth.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so that's the history, the people, the moments. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Training philosophies and techniques. This handbook is packed.
For sure. Randy Couture's eat-to-win philosophy is detailed. Big on alkaline foods, less acid-forming stuff like sugars, processed grains, even some animal products, to manage training stress, aid recovery.
He also busted some muscle myths, right? Argued against just focusing on bulk and brute strength.
Exactly. Advocated for sport-specific movements, higher reps, lower weight for endurance and durability. Smart training, not just heavy lifting. His approach to weight cutting emphasized gradual, safe methods, proper rehydration.
And those workouts of doom. Sounds intense, pushing physical and mental limits.
Then you have specialists. Chris Brennan, the West Side Strangler, known for grappling. The book breaks down his high crotch to double leg takedown.
Sean Chitwood, judo jiu-jitsu guy, shows a neck crank defense into an arm bar. Cool counter.
Pat Miletich, legendary fighter and coach, explains clinch defense crucial for controlling opponents up close.
Royce Gracie talks about Gracie jiu-jitsu evolving, incorporating other styles but keeping its core principles.
Carlos Machado details an omoplata to armbar sequence. Regan Machado shows a closed guard pivot to taking the back key positional transitions in BJJ.
John Machado explains a defense against a takedown attempt that leads into a knee bar.
Ouch. Freddie, Detroit Diesels and George, offers options for defending takedowns against the wall or cage. Common scenario.
Javier Vasquez shows how to secure hooks from rear mount and a guard pass straight into a Darce choke. Slick stuff.
Matt Lindland, the wrestler, demonstrates defending a single-leg takedown by transitioning to a guillotine choke, using offense as defense.
Mike Joker Gaimon shows a tricky snake submission from bottom mount, plus defending ground and pound against the wall.
Eric Paulson, combat submission wrestling guru, provides counters for body locks, tie clinches, and wall survival drills. Very practical.
Eddie Bravo and his rubber guard. Innovative, using leg flexibility from the bottom, plus his take on pulling guard.
Zach Even-Esh brings the underground training vibe. Sledgehammers, sandbags, developing that raw, functional strength and power. Sled training, too.
Lloyd Irvin Jr. focuses on the mental side goal setting, the competing to win mindset.
Mike Swain, the Olympian, talks about dealing with loss, learning from mistakes. Invaluable perspective.
There, Paulson again, with his CSW game assessment principles for effective training. Hard work, smart work, learning, drilling, reflection.
Jason Mayhem. Miller gives practical tips. Gear, focus, conditioning like the Hendo workout, importance of rest.
Marcia Fitosa emphasizes total preparation, deep BJJ knowledge, calculus, not math, smart training, competing often, self-assessment.
And Jacob Geisler gives advice on joint health diet. Less sugar, refined flour, fried food, hydration, specific supplements like CISIS, enzymes, fish oil plus rest and active recovery. It's a whole science.
Wow, the sheer breadth of knowledge it's incredible. It covers everything from diet to mindset to highly specific techniques.
It really shows MMA training is a complex ecosystem, not just hitting pads.
And that mental game aspect keeps coming up. It's clearly just as vital as the physical.
Absolutely. The handbook stresses it repeatedly.
Yeah.
Mental toughness, focus, visualization, learning from wins and losses. Insights from Couture, Penn, Swain, Irvin, Paulson all echo this.
There's that difference between just training hard and actually fighting smart, too. Staying relaxed under pressure. Bas Rutten and Mike Swain hit on that.
Yeah, controlling the adrenaline dump. And having a game plan, like Lloyd Irvin Jr. emphasizes, knowing what you want to do. Bas Rutten even gave tips for the night before the fight, managing nerves.
The positive mindset theme is strong too, avoiding negativity. Swain and GSP both talked about that.
Mhm.
And Eric Paulson mentioned managing ego in training, focusing on learning, not just winning gym spars.
Crucial for long-term development. And finally, Couture's 7 myths of coaching. Some real gems there.
Like winning doesn't automatically make you a good coach.
Right. Or that just having fought means you know how to teach. Coaching is its own skill, requires constant learning. And the best coach isn't always the drill sergeant type. It's about connection and communication, too.
Man, that was a seriously comprehensive dive, pulling all that together from the best of mixed martial arts. Okay, so for you listening, what was the biggest takeaway? For me, maybe that UFC origin story tied to Playboy. Just so unexpected.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And Randy Couture fighting with a broken arm. That's just next level toughness. Hard to wrap your head around.
For me, I think it's the sheer depth and diversity of the training. It's not one size fits all. You've got nutrition science, strength and conditioning innovation like Even-Esh's stuff, complex grappling systems like Bravo's, the mental game.
Wow.
It really elevates your appreciation for what these athletes go through. It's way beyond just being tough.
Absolutely. Makes you think about mastery in any field, doesn't it? The layers involved. Okay, final thought then. MMA has evolved so incredibly fast. Thinking about all these different styles and training methods we just discussed, what's next? What future disciplines or maybe completely new training approaches do you think might come along and shake things up for the next generation of fighters? That's a great question. And maybe on a related note, with all these different takes on the physical versus the mental, on strategy versus instinct, what do you think ultimately is the single most critical ingredient for success, not just in MMA, but in any really tough challenge you might face yourself? Lots to chew on there.